Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel below. We love to know what you want to hear next. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 391. Sun Well. This world has been created. Qin Mu and the rest soon realized that such a small world, they had soon reached its top, couldn't have been born naturally. Qin Mu let the flood dragons protect them while flying above the Milky Way, but while rising, they collided with an invisible barrier. They couldn't see it, but it truly existed there. It was the barrier of the world they were in, acting like a wall which separated it from the others. The reason why they thought that the world was created was because the instant they collided with the invisible barrier, countless beehive-shaped seals appeared while giving off thumping sounds. They swiftly spread out through the sky, and it looked as though the group had entered a huge beehive. It was quite a familiar sight to Qin Mu. He had seen it at Ghost Valley. The ancient gods had used beehive seals to block off the tear between Yudu world and the real world. Now, it seemed that they were used as the wall for the world made by the gods as well. We have no way to take a detour. We can only go through the Milky Way. Qin Mu examined the darkness in the surroundings. With the barrier blocking their way, they couldn't go through the sky, but only through the Milky Way, barging their way into Sun Well. This space seems strange. It doesn't look huge, and the distance between Sun Well and Moon Well is also too short. They are at most 5 miles away, Qin Mu said. However, from the map of Great Ruins, Moon Well and Sun Well are tens of thousands of miles apart. What happened here? Xianxia pondered it for a moment, then said, "Teleportation divine art. No, it should be overlap space. But that's not right as well. This is a complete space and there's no overlap. What divine art is this exactly?" The two wells in Great Ruins were tens of thousands of miles apart, yet they were only 3 to 5 miles apart in Star Sea. However, when looking at the starry sky in Eternal Peace Empire, the stars were very close to each other, but they were actually very far from each other. This place was the opposite of reality, and this really made them click their tongues in wonder. Xianxia was also confused. She didn't know what kind of divine art could have caused such an unusual sight. Qin Mu smiled and said, "The gods of ancient Great Ruins possessed remarkable abilities and many divine arts that were never passed on to us. Maybe they had created this place just for the sake of opening up a passage that's convenient for them to move around Great Ruins. Let's go to Sun Well first." 9 flood dragons covered the group while flying toward the Milky Way, but they soon grew nervous, with huge rocks the size of mountains everywhere around them. The rocks collided here and there, causing confusion. Whenever a star the size of a mountain came rushing toward them, the flood dragons would execute their divine arts to push the star away. Those stars were also man-made, and their sizes weren't too great. However, there were some unique ones among them, like those made of fine jade that was sparkling and translucent. They glowed as they streaked past them. "How pretty! This is bad." Qin Mu's face changed drastically, and the sound of the flute could be heard. The body of the numerous flood dragons hurriedly shrunk, and they all swarmed over to climb on his body. Qin Mu then threw Hu Linger onto his shoulder and grabbed Xianxia while shouting, "Fatty dragon, into the nest, now!" He brought Hu Linger and Xianxia inside, while the dragon Qilin jumped after in a hurry too. At that moment, the glow of the star that looked like a fine jade became incomparably radiant. The next instant, sword lights of all colors swept through the sky, covered the whole place as they shot at the stars the size of mountains in all directions. They were pierced through by the sword lights, earning thousands and thousands of holes. Luckily, Qin Mu had brought the bunch of dragons, Hu Linger and Xianxia, into the dragon's nest. Countless flying swords swept above them, and Hu Linger immediately shrunk her head back. A few strands of her fur were sliced off, and the dragon Qilin hurriedly pulled back his tail. A sword light swept past it at that moment, and 2 scales fell off. Everyone was still in a panicked state when the star made of fine jade vanished into thin air. Suddenly, multicolored flying swords came streaking across the sky above the dragon's nest like a meteor shower. As they collided, they transformed into a star made of fine jade and floated away into the distance. What a huge sword pellet! Hu Linger was stunned by the sight. The dragon Qilin muttered. It's even bigger than Cult Master's sword pellet. Qin Mu was also flabbergasted. There was actually such a huge sword pellet in the world. He had thought that his sword pellet was already huge, yet only a glance at the one they just saw was enough to know that his paled into insignificance by comparison. Could this be the treasure of a god? They flew out of the dragon's nest. Qin Mu had the flood dragons form their divine dragon cover once again, while others carried the dragon's nest. He acted more and more careful. Divine dragon cover was a divine art from Ling family's 9 dragons divine fire cover. It was originally a divine art for offense, but Qin Mu used it to control the 9 dragons as a formation skill. In his heart, the marvel of use lay in the heart and soul. There was never many rules for him. Some people felt his thoughts were unconstrained in style, while some felt that he was going astray from the path, but he didn't care. In the chaotic Milky Way, stars came crashing against each other from time to time, and even the divine dragon cover formed by powerful flood dragons suffered damage. Some bones were broken and some tendons snapped. Qin Mu had to continuously refine spirit pills and miraculous medicines to heal the injured dragons while having other dragons take the place of the injured ones to maintain divine dragon cover. After a painstaking journey, they finally came to the core of the Milky Way and got close to the 2 divine wells. That place was relatively safe as the stars were swirling around Sun Well and Moon Well. There were only a few of them around. Xianxia let out a sigh of relief and said in bewilderment, "Cult Master, this place is so dangerous and we needed over a dozen flood dragons to protect us. We even had to hide inside the dragon's nest from time to time to avoid danger. So how did the Sun Guardian come here?" Qin Mu raised his head and saw Sun Well and Moon Well as well as a huge, thick pillar of light shooting upward. There were 2 large circular holes above it like the openings of the wells. Since they are sun herders, of course they would drive Sun ship to this place. Besides, the abilities of Sun Guardian are extremely high. She's an existence that's like a heavenly god. Xianxia jumped in shock. An existence like heavenly gods? Qin Mu didn't explain. The flood dragons flew toward the pillar of light above. Suddenly, Qin Mu looked down, and he couldn't help being stunned. He saw that there were huge balls of light filling in the huge sun well that looked like huge suns. Of course, those suns weren't huge, so they were probably treasures forged by gods. However, with so many of them squeezed in the deep well, he was still rather blown away. Since the sun on Sun ship had extinguished, why don't they fish a sun from here? Just as he thought that, the sounds of chains rattling came from above, and an incomparably thick black chain came from the opening of the well. It was let down continuously, getting closer and closer to the sun's inside. "Young master, are the sun herders trying to hook a sun?" Hu Linger asked in astonishment. Qin Mu was also startled. There were a few huge hooks hanging below the chain, so the people above had to be trying to hook and bring up a sun from the sun well. However, he soon saw the black iron chains become scarlet red from the heat. Before they even reached the middle section of the well, they already looked like about to melt. Molten iron slowly flowed down the chain, dripping into the water. Not only that, the hooks had also softened from the heat, so before the black iron chain could even get close to the suns, the hooks were already gone. In no time, the black iron chain also snapped from the heat. Rattling sounds came from above, and a sigh sounded out from the side of the well. "We still can't fish one out." The flood dragons flew to the opening of the well. The closer they got, the wider the opening became. When the flood dragons had carried Qin Mu and the rest out, Sun Well had already become a huge hole that was 500 miles wide. Looking down it, Qin Mu couldn't see anything except for the glaring rays of the suns that were shooting straight out and shining on the sky. The rays then scattered and formed a huge dome which covered the place. The Sun Well looked more like an incomparably huge mirror that could shine back the rays of light. We didn't catch a sun, but instead got a flood dragon." A resounding voice came from the side of the well, full of astonishment. Qin Mu and the rest looked toward the source and saw a few giants of the Sun Herd tribe standing nearby. They looked like priests and were pulling onto a chain while looking at them in astonishment. Qin Mu walked to the head of the flood dragon in 2 to 3 steps and said with a smile, "Man of Carefree Village, Qin Mu, I'm here to meet the Sun Guardian. May elders please inform her. Visitor from Carefree Village. The strong practitioners of Sun Herd Tribe were astonished and hurriedly threw down their chains to greet in a loud voice. Visitor from Carefree Village, please wait a moment for us to go inform her. When they were done, they immediately turned to leave. They seemed to be mistaken. I just said I'm a man of Carefree Village, not that I was from Carefree Village. Qin Mu scratched his head and let the flood dragons land beside the well. Looking at how respectful the sun herders were, they had to be telling the higher-ups of the tribe to hold a grand welcome for him. Xianxia knocked on the dragon's nest and shouted inside, Princess Xiao, we are at the sun well. Come out quickly. Ling Yuxiu woke up from her meditative state and leaped up, transforming into a trail of dragon qi. She changed back when she landed on the ground. Xianxia was extremely envious. Plump chest Princess Cultivation has improved drastically in this short while. She's even stronger than me now. Ling Yuxiu looked around, and her mind trembled violently. She kept looking at the huge ship which had stopped not far from Sunwell. Even if it was not her first time seeing Sun ship, it was still hard for her to conceal the shock in her heart. Sun ship was simply too huge, and its chains were dragging a black sun as it crawled on the ground. The deck of that ship was a piece of land on which tens of thousands of people could live and reproduce. She looked at the surroundings, and her heart was shaken once more. The sun well was shrouded by a dome which formed a unique space that emanated with an energy that made people stir restlessly. Qi of pure yang. Qin Mu in the meantime was examining a huge stone tablet beside the well. Hu Linger came forward then and took out a small booklet, brush and ink, planning to copy the writings on the tablet. Ever since she had started learning how to write and read from deaf, she had become super serious, copying down every word she encountered. However, she didn't recognize the words on the tablet, so she could only ask, Young master, what's written here? These are inscriptions in a god language. It records the history below Sun Well. He then read out for her. The emperor ordered Ziqing to forge sun and moon well, but she was naughty and mischievous. 100 years passed, and nothing was done. The emperor was furious and ordered her to be put to death. Ziqing then trembled with fear. The wells were forged in 50 years, yet there was no light from the suns and moons inside them. At that time, she took out her eyes and dropped them into the wells. From that moment on, there was light from the suns and moons. The emperor then ordered the court recorder to erect a memorial tablet. He raised his head up to look at the black sun floating above Sun ship and said, That sun had God Ziqing's blood, which was why it could burst forth with radiance. However, I've no idea why it went out. The sun was extinguished because of powerful enemies. Qin Mu looked toward the source of the voice and saw several hundred sun herders walking over to them. Their bodies were all gigantic. The one in the lead was the old chief of the Sun Herd Tribe. When he saw Qin Mu, he was slightly stunned and revealed an expression of disappointment. So it's the little friend from Border Dragon City. I thought it was someone from Carefree Village. Little friend, what are you here for? Qin Mu smiled and said, To meet Sun Guardian. The old chief shook his head and said, Sun Guardian doesn't have long to live, so we are currently choosing a new Sun Guardian. Since little friend has deep connections with Carefree Village, stay and witness the ceremony. Qin Mu's heart trembled, and worry showed up on his face. Didn't Yan Jingjing still have many years to live? Why? The devil gods of a foreign territory attacked Sun Well. Sun Guardian personally led everyone to defend against them, so her lifespan is more or less exhausted. The old chief sighed. Come with me. Sun Guardian should smile as she departs this world after being able to see an old friend again. The faces of the sun herders around were dim as their white robes fluttered in the wind. This gave a sorrowful atmosphere to their group. The old chief stopped and looked around before shouting, Why the sorrowful looks? When she became the Sun Guardian, it was destined that she would have to fuse with Sunship and become one, standing side by side with the ancestors. This is an honor. Why are all of you feeling sorrowful? The sky is turning dark. The devil gods from the foreign territory will try to invade again. So pick up your spirits. Qin Mu raised his head to look at him, and saw his white hair trembling. Yan Jingjing was his granddaughter. The reason he asked why all of them were in sorrow was because he could not express his own feeling. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 392, Reignite the Sun. On Sun Ship, the qi of pure yang was even denser. Yet the place wasn't hot at all, but instead had the warmth of spring. Sun Ship was very large, and its land was very vast. However, to the sun herders, the resting place wasn't big at all. That was because they were all giants over 30 yards high. When Ling Yuxiu and Si Yunxiang looked at them, they couldn't hold back their exclamations of surprise. Even the children of sun herders were about 10 yards in height. Their bodies were covered in muscles, every little movement showing it off. That sun guardian should also be a giant, Ling Yuxiu thought to herself before letting out a sigh. The one that herds cows is really here to help reignite the sun and not to flirt around. A giant wouldn't like a small thing like him. Besides, that Yan Jingjing is a god. Even if she's a female god, she must still be muscular and strong. Even a slight smile might reveal muscles on her face. Even though the beauty standard of the one that herds cows is weird, it shouldn't be weird to that extent. Qin Mu looked around. The reason sun herders were known as such was because they were a people who herded the sun. It was similar to moon herders. Their name came from the fact that they herded the moon. Since they were herders, it of course couldn't be just one sun or moon, but a bunch of them. There had been a point in time when sun herders drove numerous suns through the land in darkness. They would move from the east to the west to drive away the darkness. When nighttime came, moon herders would bring out moons to travel great ruins, looping forward and backward. Sun Ship looked even more dilapidated than before. The previous time Qin Mu had seen it, the deck had been still looked quite good. Even though there had been numerous traces of battle, the sun herders had cleaned them up pretty nicely, so the place retained its sacredness. However, now there were crumbling fences and dilapidated walls. There were also numerous injured people of the sun herder tribe. When they saw the chief leading Qin Mu and the rest, they immediately held their breaths. Only when Qin Mu and the rest had walked farther away did they let out soft groans. They had gritted their teeth to lower their voices as much as possible. They were trying to preserve their dignity. "Chief, you have the most heroic warriors in this world," Qin Mu said with deep respect. "There are no cowards among the sun herders," the old chief said with a resonating voice. Qin Mu saw wisps of black smoke floating out from the wounds of sun herders. They were the burns left behind by the strong heavenly devil gods. The qi of pure yang of Sunwell was helping them to refine it. Not long later, they passed by a rundown shrine where a half-broken halberd was stabbed in the center of the huge hall. Black gas surged around it, and screeches came from within it. "Cult Master, it's a devil god weapon," Si Yunxiang said in a low voice. Qin Mu nodded, but didn't say anything. As Heavenly Devil Cult Master, the head of the number 1 sect of the Devil Path in Eternal Peace Empire, he was naturally not a stranger to the Devil Path. Qin Mu pursued knowledge to the end and applied what he knew. The marvel of use lay in his heart. In front of him was learning, discovering, and achieving, while behind was freedom from nature, the so-called Tao. That was why he didn't care about differentiating between gods and devils. Great educational heavenly devil scriptures was a good example. If one's heart was of devil nature, they would see techniques of the devil path. If one's heart was of God nature, they'd find techniques of the God path. If one's heart was of the Buddha, they'd see Buddha techniques. It was clear from the wounds of sun herders and the devil god weapon that the strong practitioners who had attacked Sunwell had extremely high attainments in the devil path. Their knowledge far exceeded what he, the heavenly devil cult master, possessed. When Moon Guardian was facing the attacks of the devils from the foreign territory, he had chosen to escape and abandon his tribesmen. Sun Guardian, on the other hand, chose to accompany her tribesmen and die protecting them. Qin Mu recalled the incomparably frail girl whose legs were gnawed at by Sun Ship. He then thought to himself, Sun Guardian's moral integrity is much higher than that of Moon Guardian. When they passed by a ruin, they saw a huge golden bell. It was over 30 yards high, and banging sounds would ring out from time to time. At the bottom of the bell, black smoke leaked out, so there had to be something powerful suppressed inside. Some sun herders stood nearby, executing sun true fire to purify the strong practitioners inside the bell. Other than that, there were also some sun herders that were piling the corpses of strangely shaped monsters together. They executed true fire to incinerate them, which resulted in a nauseous smell. Xianxia and Ling Yuxiu were frowning. They didn't know from which race was the enemy and why they had to attack Sun well. Sun herders are the protectors of great ruins, even if many people don't know that they've been saved from many dangers. When Imperial Preceptor invaded great ruins, he was also forced back by the Sun herders. When the gods and devils of the other races come to invade great ruins, they also had to first pass through the Sun herders. Moon herders are all dead, so only Sun herders are left, Qin Mu explained. Ling Yuxiu's face became slightly red. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor invaded great ruins, she was among his troops in charge of scouting. It was also during that time that she had come in contact with Qin Mu. If Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had really invaded great ruins, what awaited Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor would have probably been an incomparably painful lesson. They came to the center of Sun Ship and finally met Sun Guardian. Yan Jingjing was only left with her head and hands still outside. Her body had already sunk into Sun Ship, though her 4 hands were still holding onto the thick pillars, giving off a terrifying god's prestige. The old chief came to her side and said in a low voice, "Jingjing, that youth Qin Mu from Border Dragon City has come to see you." "The cowherd boy came to see me?" Yan Jingjing let go of her grip on the pillars, as she wanted to break free of Sun Ship, but her body had already fused with it, so she couldn't move. She panted heavily while saying, "I can't come out, I can't see you. Come over here." Qin Mu walked forward and came in front of her. Yan Jingjing's face still had a childlike look to it. She raised her eyes at Qin Mu and smiled. "You really came? It's truly wonderful to be able to meet a childhood friend again." Qin Mu stood in front of her and looked at her eyes in detail. He said in a gentle voice, "I'm here. I've grown slightly." The girl's eyes were filled with blazing flames that were like 2 small suns. They could no longer see anything, completely filled by the sun true fire. The structure of her eyes was gone. She loosened her grip on the pillars again and her body shrunk rapidly, but the ground of the Sun Ship shrunk as well, keeping her trapped no matter what. Sun Guardian was like this, and Moon Guardian had also been like that. As long as they took on the responsibility of Sun Guardian and Moon Guardian, they would slowly merge with Sun Ship and Moon Ship, entrusting their life to the ship. It would absorb their life force until they became one. Qin Mu's face held a complicated expression. He had become the Moon Guardian when he was searching for the people of the village. However, he had only used the ship for a short period of time, so it didn't exhaust him much. Yan Jingjing, on the other hand, had already fused with Sun Ship. She wasn't long for the world anymore. The more Sun Ship's energy was used, the more it would fuse with the Guardian, and the more it would exhaust their life. Yan Jingjing's flesh and blood had fused completely with Sun Ship. Even if Qin Mu reignited the sun, he wasn't sure if he could still save her. When the girl wasn't holding onto the pillars, she looked frail, pitifully so. Her neck was so thin that she couldn't even lift her own head, that her neck would break at any moment. She had said Qin Mu was her childhood friend, but he had only met her once. Yet it was still true, since she didn't have any playmates. She was the Sun Guardian, and the tribesmen only held respect for her. The youth in the tribe were all respectful of her and wouldn't play with her. Ever since she was young, she had carried the heavy burden of protecting her tribe and protecting great ruins. Near Border Dragon City, Qin Mu, a youth from a foreign race, had come onto her ship and chatted with her. Just because of it, she treated him as her playmate and close friend. To a certain extent, Qin Mu was similar to her. When he was young, he also didn't have any playmates. He had to learn all kinds of things from the elders in the village and train diligently. There was no one of the same age to play with him. However, Qin Mu had 9 elders who treated him with utmost care, while Yan Jingjing had elders that held respect for her. Xianxia, Hu Linger, and Ling Yuxiu came to Yan Jingjing's side with their hearts filled with sorrow. The girl before them was about the same age as them, yet the burden she bore was countless times heavier than theirs. Xianxia couldn't resist asking, "The sun is extinguished, but there are still many suns in Sun Well. Why don't you guys change the sun? These chains that are chaining the black sun, why can't you use them to capture a new sun? These chains were made by the heavenly workers' god race, who are already extinct," the old chief said. "The chains that we, the sun herders, forge with true fire cannot withstand the true fire of the sun, so we can't fish a new sun out. We had already tried countless times." Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly, and he remembered Dragon Rearing Sovereign's words to mute. There are still heavenly workers in this world who could forge such a chain. The old chief took a look at him and shook his head. The remaining heavenly workers are all in Carefree Village now. If you ever return to Carefree Village, you might be able to bring a heavenly worker to save our sun herd tribe. But you're yet to find it, right? Qin Mu shook his head and said, "I have indeed not found Carefree Village, but I've come to help you guys reignite the sun. And even if I can't reignite it, I still have other abilities. I had learned smithing from a heavenly worker before, so I might just be able to forge new chains for you guys to bring up a new sun." He smiled radiantly and said to the frail little girl, "I've come to fulfill my promise. I promised you, and I don't go back on my word." He stood up and raised his head to look at the black sun in the sky. He asked with a calm expression, "You had once told me that if I ignite this sun, you will be able to break free. If I ignite this sun now, can you still break free from sunship?" "I don't know." The flames in Yan Jingjing's eyes suddenly blazed even more vigorously, as though hope was renewed in her heart. The old chief of the sun herders had a dim expression as he said, "Little friend Qin, even though you're a visitor from Carefree Village, you have yet to go there, and you don't have the ability to reignite the sun. But even if you do so, Sun Guardian won't be able to live for long. Her lifespan has been mostly exhausted. Death is like an extinguished lamp. The oil of her life is almost finished." He roused his spirit and said, "Don't waste your efforts. We are currently choosing the next Sun Guardian, and as the visitor from Carefree Village, come and witness the birth of a new Sun Guardian. Tonight, the devils will come again and attack, so we have to choose the next sun person to be prepared for any accidents." Qin Mu shook his head. "No matter if I can ignite the sun or not, I have to try." The old chief shook his head and brought the tribesmen to leave as they got ready to choose the next Sun Guardian. Qin Mu took out Sun Jade Eye and placed it on the ground. Raising his head to look at the black sun, he pondered over it for a moment before raising the Jade Eye up high, near the black sun on the chain. "Wait here for me. I will come back after reigniting the sun." Ling Yuxiu immediately shouted loudly, "When the sun reignites, it will burn you to death." "It won't." The sound of a flute could be heard, and the fire flood dragons soared into the sky to follow behind Qin Mu. He then shouted back from far away, "With these flood dragons, I can escape alive. Sun Guardian, is your sun a real sun or a fake sun?" Ling Yuxiu asked in a hurry. "It's a god artifact. It is said that this sun was a treasure forged by heavenly god Ziqing," Yan Jingjing said. "This is bad." Ling Yuxiu's scalp crawled. The one who herds cows hadn't asked for details before running away to finish his task. When the treasure of the heavenly god went ablaze, the might of the heavenly god would spread out and probably turn the one who herds cows and his flood dragons to ashes. "Wouldn't that mean I can succeed as the cult master?" Xianxia's eyes instantly lit up. Ling Yuxiu gave her a cold look, and Xianxia hurriedly laughed. "I'm just joking. I don't want to be a young widow. I was thinking, since they are sun herders, they should be able to withstand the divine fire of the sun. Maybe we can ask that old chief to protect the cult master." Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 393. Your Highness. "Fatty dragon," Linger called out. The dragon Qilin understood the severity of the situation. He shook his body and transformed into his true form. Ling Yuxiu and Xianxia jumped onto his back while Yan Jingjing said, "They are at the sun shrine of our sun herd tribe. Head over in that direction and it will be the highest shrine." The dragon Qilin immediately exerted his strength to sprint toward the place where they were choosing the next sun guardian. When they came to the sun shrine, they saw the symbol of a three-legged crow within the picture of a sun on the doors. Two giants, propped up on their battle axes, stood guarding them. They were adult sun herders, and their bodies were extremely tall and sturdy. Their battle axes were crossed in front of the door to prevent people from going in. "Stop, outsiders!" The two sun herders had solemn looks as they shouted out in dull voices. "The shrine is a sacred ground. Outsiders can't barge in." Hu Linger jumped down and said, "It's your sun guardian who has asked us to come. Quickly inform your chief that something big is going to happen." "Wait a moment." One of the sun herders immediately went into the shrine. After a moment, he walked out and said respectfully, "Chief has invited all of you inside to observe the ceremony." They entered the shrine and instantly felt minute. The giants of Sun Herd tribe were all gathered there, standing tall. When the girls walked among them, they were merely up to their ankles. The giants were surrounding a circular platform upon which a selection was taking place. Sounds of astonishment came from time to time. Hu Linger jumped up as she wanted to take a look at the situation, but how could she do it when the fence was simply too high? Her body was too short, so even if she jumped 15 yards into the air, she still wouldn't be able to see what was happening. Hu Linger swayed her tail in a hurry, and her body started to float up. She could then finally see the platform. There were numerous young men and women separated in two groups. In the center of the platform were three god statues, and every one of them was a mutant with 3 legs and wings that were spread opened. Their bodies were bent, carrying a giant furnace. It was different from usual, since it was circular and its sides had openings. There was nothing like medicinal stones in the furnace. A strong youth of the Sun Herder tribe cutting his wrist and letting his blood flow into the huge circular furnace. He then executed true fire and reigniting the furnace. A ball of fire soon appeared, its flames growing larger and larger. Instantly, blazing rays burst forth from the openings in the furnace, becoming more and more dazzling. Terrifying pulses came from the furnace along with the roars of strange beasts that would grip the heart or anyone who heard them. The sun herders in the surroundings revealed delighted expressions, but at that moment, the rays suddenly dimmed and the flames in the furnace died down. Next, an unbelievably muscular girl went up and sliced open her wrist. She also failed, but she had fared slightly better than the youth before her. An apparition of a fire dragon had actually taken shape in the flames of the furnace. It was just that it lasted for a short while before vanishing. Hu Linger looked on the other side of the platform and saw the old chief and some other white-haired elders of the Sun Herd tribe. They were observing the test below. Hu Linger's heart stirred slightly, and she simply flew over to them. She heard an elder say, "The body of pure yang is simply too hard to find. Jingjing held out for 10 years, but if we don't find another body of pure yang, tonight might be the night when Sun Well will get invaded." Worry entered the expressions of all elders. For anyone but the body of pure yang, it was difficult to withstand the terrifying and boundless energy of Sun's ship. If one tried to forcefully master it, they would soon be incinerated. There are simply too few bodies of pure yang. The old chief sighed and said, "If we can't find one, I will control Sun's ship and fight those devil gods with my life." His constitution wasn't the body of pure yang, but his cultivation was dense, so he could last for some time. Below, on the platform, young men and women tried to light up the sun furnace, but they all failed. This caused the elder's face to grow more and more solemn. Ling Yuxiu and the rest came to where the old chief was, and he raised his hand. A green slab under their feet rose up and lifted them up to observe the ceremony. "Chief, Human Emperor Qin is currently helping you guys reignite the sun. If he succeeds, he'll turn into ashes," Ling Yuxiu said in a hurry. "May Chief please go forward and assist the Human Emperor." She was very clever. She knew his other identities would hardly push the chief of the Sun Herd tribe to aid him, so she just took the identity of the Human Emperor. The old chief shook his head and said, "It's impossible for him to reignite the sun. It has long died down and only the appearance of a fire god of pure yang could reignite it." Don't worry, little friend Qin not only won't be able to reignite the sun, he won't even get near it. It's too hot over there. Even though it's an extinguished sun, its power is still no small matter. Look. He raised his arm, which was as long as a flying bridge. He then pointed below them and said, when we, the sun herders, choose our sun guardian, we look for a person with a natural-born pure yang, so their blood would assist the true fire in order to ignite the sun furnace. It's merely an ordinary treasure, but lighting it up is already so difficult. It's even more impossible to reignite the sun. Human Emperor Qin has a god's eye. He might just be able to, Ling Yuxiu said angrily. The old chief cut her off and said, we, the sun herders, had also found numerous god's eyes and god's blood over the years to reignite the sun, but none of them had worked. There's no need for you to say any more. Observe the ceremony. Ling Yuxiu was furious. We had come to help you reignite the sun, rushing over full sincerity, yet you aren't willing to. So aren't you sun herders bitterly disappointing us with your actions? The old chief's gaze landed on her and he said seriously, it's not that we, the sun herders, are not reasonable. It's just that we need to choose the next sun guardian. After the sun sets, the darkness will invade, and that's when the soul of sun guardian will return to sunship. She can no longer hold on anymore. Without sun guardian, our sun herd tribe will surely be unable to defend against the invasion of those evil devils. The moon herders are already wiped out, and if the sun herders are wiped out as well, the devil gods will come to control Great Ruins. Do you think the world outside Great Ruins will be able to defend against them? Right now, choosing the next sun guardian is of utmost importance. Ling Yuxiu was stunned. Xianxia sneered and said, even if you choose the next sun guardian, so what? Aren't they still going to die in sunship, fusing into it? It's an honor to die protecting the tribesmen and Great Ruins, the old chief said solemnly. Little friends, don't worry, little friend Qin will be fine. He won't be able to get near that black sun, and he will retreat when he finds out what it's really like, another elder nearby said. The other elders all nodded, but at that moment, a vast heat wave suddenly pulsed through the building. The expressions of the old chief and the few elders changed instantly. They got up with astonishment evident in their eyes. This pulse, that extinguished sun, this is bad. Little friend Qin. Boom! The old chief and the elders rushed into the sky, opening a hole in the majestic sun shrine's roof. Linger immediately shouted out, and the dragon Qilin brought them after the giants. Once out, they looked at the sky. The sunlight was dazzling. The black sun had vanished without a trace, having been replaced by a sun blazing with yellow-white rays and emanating heat. Young master will be fine, right? Linger immediately made the dragon Qilin fly toward the sun. Ling Yuxiu was also anxious as she hurried the dragon Qilin again and again. Only Xianxia's heart bloomed with joy. I'm going to become a charming widow. They flew into midair, but the dragon Qilin suddenly changed his direction. He flew toward the pillars below, stunning the girls. They then looked there and saw two figures as well as a group of flood dragons. The dragon Qilin landed, and the three girls immediately jumped down. They saw Qin Mu laying down a frail and thin girl from Sun Ship on the floor. Ling Yuxiu hurriedly went forward. The one who herds cows, you. Shush. Qin Mu put a finger on his lips and said in a low voice. She fainted. I'm quite skilled in nursing girls. My reputation of the divine physician comes from Flower Alley. Ling Yuxiu pinched him with ruthlessness under the armpit and grumbled. I was worried to death. I said that there will be no danger. Awaken, Qin Mu said with a smile. Layers of formations swirled in his eyes as he opened Cinnabar Heaven's eyes. He then executed secrets of dragon control and a flood dragon flew over. It leaned on his shoulder while its body coiled around his waist. With the borrowed dragon chi, Qin Mu's cultivation rose drastically, and more layers of formations surged in his eyes. He opened all 9 layers of Heaven's eyes to check on Yan Jingjing's body. After a moment, he dispersed secrets of dragon control, and the layers of heavens in his eyes faded away. However, the flood dragon didn't leave his shoulder and continued to lay there comfortably. Tales of herding gods. Chapter 394, Cage of Heaven and Earth. Ling Yuxiu and the rest were all astonished. They saw more and more sun herders walking over and kneeling down on one knee while greetings of your highness rang out continuously. By then, nearly all of the sun herders had come and were looking at them. There was close to 100,000 of them kneeling down on one knee with their heads lowered. There was no emperor among the sun herders, and Qin Mu was not even a sun herder, so in which place was he a royal person? Could Qin Mu be the highness of great ruins? Or is he the highness of carefree village? Is the one who herds cows the crown prince of great ruins? Ling Yuxiu was slightly at a loss. Cowherd boy still had such a background? How was he able to steer the sun ship and control its power? Hu Linger, on the other hand, was slightly disappointed. Isn't young master a male fox turned intelligent? Qin Mu loosened his grip, and his figure gradually returned back to normal. The two arms that had popped out also disappeared. He then immediately helped the old chief up and said, "Chief, quickly have all the tribesmen stand up." "Thank you, your highness." The old chief rose and said solemnly, "I didn't know about your highness's identity before, so please forgive me if I have offended you in any way." He turned around and raised his arms up high while shouting to the sun herders below. "People of the sun herder tribe who had protected Sun well, the highness of Carefree Village is here. Carefree Village has not forgotten us. The long wait, the painstaking 20,000 years, we have made it. Sun well won't fall. The sun herders won't be wiped out." Delight spread across the faces of the earthly-looking sun herders. They cheered and laughed loudly. The pressure brought by the days of struggles and the cruelty of war all vanished without a trace. The invasion of the devil gods had shrouded the sun herders near the sun well with a dark cloud of pressing extermination. All of the tribesmen were fighting with their lives for the future of their tribe. However, they didn't have the confidence of avoiding this calamity. The pressure on them grew heavier and heavier, and the atmosphere in the tribe also became more and more stifling. However, with Qin Mu's arrival, their vanished hope had once again been reignited. It was a party with giants running and cheering. Some of them cried from happiness while others danced and sung. A few of them went to inform the injured soldiers, dying elders, while others went to offer incense to their ancestors and thank them for the blessing. Is Chief mistaken? Qin Mu looked at the people partying below in puzzlement. He said to the old chief, "I'm not your highness." The old chief shook his head. "If you aren't a sun herder, then there's only one way for you to be able to control Sunship, and that's by being a royalty. Back when Ziqing created Sunship under the Emperor's order, other than the Sun Guardian with the body of pure yang, the other group of people he allowed to control it was the royalty. Your highness isn't a sun herder, so you naturally have to be a royalty from Carefree Village." Qin Mu shook his head. "I'm the Overlord body, and Overlord body is the body of pure yang as well." "Overlord body? What Overlord body?" The chief was in a daze. The party below was getting rowdier and rowdier until it was extremely bustling. He probed, "Your Highness, is Overlord body the name for the royal bloodline?" Qin Mu couldn't help being suspicious. Was Overlord body really the name for royalty? Yet it seemed like something was wrong somewhere in that question. If Overlord body was the name for royalty, could Su Xianxia be a royalty too? If he was royalty, what was the so-called true and pseudo-overlord bodies that village chief had mentioned? Could there be pseudo-royal bloodlines too? If Overlord body didn't belong to royalty, was it then the body of pure yang? If it was the body of pure yang, why could Qin Mu control Moonship? Doubt grew in his heart. He wanted to find village chief to ask for clarification. He had always known himself to be Overlord body, having an invincible belief in it. In regards to that, he strongly believed village chief's words. However, the words of the chief of the sun herders made him suspicious. After the party, the chief gave the order to continue choosing the next sun guardian, and the sun herders were puzzled. However, they still returned back to the sun shrine. Qin Mu also brought Ling Yuxiu and the rest over. As a royalty, they were waited upon as guests of honor. Qin Mu looked down and saw numerous sun herders going forward to light up the sun furnace. However, it would die down right after being ignited by most of them, and not one of them could last for a long time. What was even weirder was when they ignited the sun furnace, there would be marvelous apparitions appearing within it. There were pictures of unusual animal breeds, like fire dragons, fire phoenixes, fire flood dragons, and fire qilin, which gave off wonderful sounds. Ling Yuxiu and the rest felt extremely weird. Xianxia said in a low voice, "The sights in the furnace are like spirit bodies, yet they don't look the same." Everyone nodded. There were 4 great spirit bodies, which were vermilion bird, black tortoise, green dragon, and white tiger. The 4 great spirit bodies was the collective term, while each name was a main category. A person might not have the form of vermilion bird, black tortoise, green dragon, or white tiger, but they might one of the numerous dragon wolf spirit bodies in Wolf Store Country, and it originated from green dragon spirit body. However, from the apparitions that appeared in the sun furnace, the spirit bodies of the sun herders had fire dragons and fire phoenixes. All of them looked like branches of vermilion bird spirit body. However, vermilion bird spirit body didn't seem to be the so-called body of pure yang. Instead, it was a fire attribute spirit body. But the spirit bodies of the sun herders couldn't be simply classified as vermilion bird spirit body. Chief, could the world not only have the 4 great spirit bodies? Qin Mu asked in suspicion. For great spirit bodies? You mean green dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise types of spirit bodies? The old chief shook his head and said, "Body of pure yang is not among these 4 great spirit bodies." As expected, everyone's hearts trembled violently. There was indeed not only 4 great spirit bodies, there were still other ones. For great spirit bodies should be a term from the people outside great ruins, right? The old chief asked. There's not only the 4 great spirit bodies in this world. There's still body of pure yang, body of pure yin, as well as even stronger spirit bodies. The saying of 4 great spirit bodies came during the period of the last phase. There are some legends in my tribe that there were many spirit bodies in the past, as many as a few hundred types. However, after the great calamity, most of them vanished. Restrictions were placed in the people outside great ruins, which is why there are only the 4 great spirit bodies left. Ling Yuxiu and Xianxia looked at each other, their gazes both empty and full of fright. It was completely different from what they had heard. The abandoned people in great ruins were supposed to be the ones sealed and cursed, never allowed to leave great ruins. If they stepped a foot outside, they had to be killed without mercy. How did it then become that the people outside great ruins were the sealed ones? There are only 4 great spirit bodies outside, the old chief said. Yet there can be many other types of spirit bodies within great ruins, so the ones sealed are the people outside. They live in a cage, yet they don't know about it themselves, living under a fake starry sky, cultivated by the gods. They are just a bunch of pitiful bugs. Ling Yuxiu and Xianxia grunted. When the people of Eternal Peace Empire saw the abandoned people of great ruins, they found them as pitiful as bugs. Yet they would have never expected that they were the real pitiful bugs in the eyes of the people outside. Great ruins was free. It had the true sky. The old chief's words sent their hearts in disarray. However, when Qin Mu linked it to the calculation Heaven Alliance had done, discovering that the sun, moon, and stars were fake, he felt the words of the old chief were pretty logical. What was sealed couldn't be great ruins, but the outside world. Chief, this world should have overlord body too, right? He asked confidently. The old chief shook his head. Your Highness, I have never heard of overlord body before. In the tribe's records, there is nothing about such a constitution. Qin Mu waved his hand and said with a smile, if you don't know, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Your knowledge is too shallow, not like that of my village's chief who is experienced and knowledgeable. Chief, if I was this highness, a royalty, could I ignite the sun furnace? The old chief smiled and said, even though your highness is royalty, it's probably impossible to ignite the sun furnace. It can only use the blood from the body of pure yang as a guide, igniting the furnace with true fire. Without the body of pure yang, it's impossible to do it. We, the Sun Herder tribe, are widely known for our bodies of pure yang, and only we can ignite the sun furnace. Not even the royalty can. Qin Mu jumped down and walked toward the sun furnace. However, the blood of Overlord body can ignite the sun furnace. He went to the platform and slit open his wrist. Fresh blood flowed into sun furnace, and Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly as he executed true fire, which surged into the sun furnace. Boom! The sun furnace instantly blazed fiercely as though a sun had risen, releasing surging heat waves and heat energy. In a split second, sunlight lit up the whole sun shrine. In the sun furnace, there were no apparitions of fire dragons or fire Qilin. Instead, there was a human figure, and it became larger and larger until it filled up the entire sun furnace. It then walked out with its hands clasped around the sun furnace as though holding a sun in front of its chest. Qin Mu dispersed the true fire, and the sun furnace was instantly extinguished. The human figure disappeared at the same time, and the sun furnace landed back onto the backs of the three god statues. Qin Mu's confidence was reignited, and he returned back up. He smiled toward the dumbfounded chief of the sun herders. Now, does this prove that I'm an overlord body? The old chief had a dazed expression, feeling slightly puzzled. He muttered, "The royalty can also possess the body of pure yang. It must be this case." Qin Mu shook his head and smiled. "This is the effect of overlord body." He was full of confidence. "Village chief indeed didn't lie to me. There's really overlord body in this world." Yet he didn't know that he possessed the most ordinary body which had no attributes. It was because he was a piece of white paper that he was able to change his attribute as he willed. He could transform into 4 great spirit bodies and control the vital chi of vermilion bird, black tortoise, green dragon, and white tiger. He could also transform into body of pure yang and control the pure yang vital chi. It wasn't because of any overlord body. Ever since village chief had mentioned overlord body, Qin Mu had struggled and cultivated diligently. The constitution of a normal person could also go through an unimaginable change. He used 1,000 times more hard work than others to transform his constitution again and again, slowly walking towards an unknown. This created numerous possibilities that couldn't be predicted in his future. Qin Mu treated it as him being the overlord body, ignoring his hard work when cultivating. "Chief, the sky is almost dark," an elder of the sun herders suddenly said solemnly. The old chief's heart tightened, and he looked toward Qin Mu. "Your Highness, the monsters from the foreign territory are going to invade once more. May your Highness assist us." Qin Mu nodded as he saw the sky barrier of sun, well being shrouded by darkness. The surroundings shone with bright light while the outside filled with complete darkness. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 395. Violent His Highness. The sun herders on Sun ship flew into midair and surveyed the barrier that shrouded Sun well anxiously as though a great enemy was arriving. The barrier of Sun well was formed by the rays spewed out from the well, forming a light body of a hemisphere. It covered the sun well and formed a heaven and earth with a radius of several hundred yards. Qin Mu had never been to Sun well, but he reckoned that there had to be a trick outside the light hemisphere to conceal itself so it wouldn't be eye-catching and would not stand out. Otherwise, news of a huge golden ball shining radiantly in great ruins would have long spread throughout the place and even to the outside world. Fengdu was somewhat similar. It would only appear at night and it couldn't be seen at all. One could only go into it by chance and coincidence. Sunwell had to be like that too. If one was in great ruins, they might not be able to see Sunwell at all. That was why it wasn't an easy place to find. The devil gods had to have spent a great deal of effort trying to find it. The sky barrier of Sunwell was shining radiantly as though they forged from golden leaves. Suddenly a huge face appeared behind it and tried to squeeze in. It looked like it wanted to get into the Sunwell. The face's chin was very long, like a handle, and the mouth was located at its bottom. There was only one eye that was humongous and took up the center of the face. It was like a huge ball propped on top of the nose bridge, which looked very weird. Which world is this devil god from? Qin Mu was stunned. He had not seen a devil god that looked like that. At that moment, he suddenly heard a smacking sound coming from all directions. He saw more and more weird faces sticking against the sky barrier. In the blink of an eye, its whole size of several hundred yards was covered with faces. They were of all sizes and all looked different. However, their structure was the same, with a huge, disproportionate eye in the center and a mouth located at the bottom of a long chin. The eyeballs were rolling around here and there, looking at the interesting stuff inside the barrier while giving off peculiar smiles that made everyone's scalp crawl. Suddenly, the eyeballs all looked toward the sun that was chained up in midair and filled with astonishment. "These are body replicators," the old chief said with a solemn face. "This devil race is different from others of their kin, for they are proficient in assimilation. When they meet a life form, they will assimilate it and change it wholly, turning it into their clansmen or even part of them." Qin Mu was slightly stunned. To assimilate the opponent and turn them into their clansmen or part of them. There was really such a weird race? The most bizarre point about the body replicators is that they share the same mind. Fear showed up on the old chief's face, but quickly concealed it in his heart. If you get caught by them, your mind will join theirs. Body replicator Devil God usually has close to billions of replicated bodies. Its mind is incomparably powerful, and if you are caught by one of his bodies, it'll crush your mind easily and reform you into one of them. Ling Yuxiu, Xianxia, and the rest couldn't help feeling a chill run down their spine. If such a devil god rushed out of great ruins and came to Eternal Peace Empire would probably become part of the body replicator devil race in a matter of days. Who could withstand billions of minds gathered together? It looked like it was truly like what the old chief of the Sun Herders had said. If the Sun Herders were wiped out, the devil gods in great ruins would be able to break free and the world outside would be wiped out as well. Suddenly, the faces in the sky vanished and the old chief immediately said, "May your highness control Sun's ship to assist us." Qin Mu immediately flew over to the pillars and stretched his hand out to touch one of them. The boundless energy in Sun's ship came flooding toward him and caused his corporeal body to expand drastically. His aura also climbed crazily, breaking through 7 stars, celestial being, life and death and divine bridge to enter an unknown realm. Boom! Explosions came from his body, which was produced by the opening of his divine treasures. However, since the speed of it all happening was too fast, it was as if there was only one loud explosion. God's aura burst forth in all directions from his body and caused a short warp in space. What followed afterward was the ripples of space trembling. How powerful! A world-shaking voice came from Qin Mu's mouth. By then, he had become one with Sun's ship, and the energy coming from it was even much greater than what he'd gotten from Moon's ship. Its moon had been extinguished and about to crumble, whereas the sun of Sun's ship had been reignited by him. Due to that, the ship's energy had increased greatly. That energy was the qi of pure yang, which was incomparably violent, filling his heart with the desire to destroy. 2 arms grew from under his armpits and grabbed hold of the other 2 pillars. The energy in Qin Mu's body was still rising frantically, and at that moment, he heard a pop sound and looked back in astonishment. A thick and sturdy leg had grown out from his tailbone. Ugh, would Sister Jing grow a 3rd leg as well? He thought to himself secretly. Standing with 3 legs on the ground, Qin Mu had a stable footing and his confidence was instantly boosted as he looked toward the sky barrier. It was abnormally quiet. Then there was a sudden explosion when a long chin pierced the barrier of Sun Well. The mouth opened up, and countless body replicators flew out from it. They looked like countless bugs. Black as night, they looked like a dark cloud. It grew furiously and transformed into a black sea. It surged forth and pounced towards Sun's ship. Ling Yuxiu, Xianxia, and the rest raised their heads to take a look and their scalp crawled. The countless body replicating devils were actually moving up and down like the waves. The numbers at which they were pouring down could drown out Sun's ship in one go. That long chin that had stabbed through the sky barrier was spewing more and more devils. Ling Yuxiu and Xianxia had both been on the battlefield before and experienced the baptism if it in Wolf Store country. During that attack, the scale of the battle was huge and tens of thousands of soldiers had clashed on the wasteland. When the divine arts practitioners, huge beasts, and flying ships went for one another, flesh and blood flew in all directions. However, it was a completely different sight from what was in front of their eyes at that moment. It paled into insignificance in comparison and didn't deserve to be mentioned. Attack! On Sun's ship, the Sun Herders roared with excitement and took out their spirit weapons. They were fired up and ready to welcome the incoming battle. Hu Linger was also fired up by their hot-bloodedness and raised her tiny arms while her face was red with excitement. Her voice was still soft and immature as she shouted loudly, "Attack!" The flood dragons behind her also became excited, and they all stretched out their necks while overflowing with murderous intent. They all opened their mouths to roar, "Maha!" Hu Linger jumped onto the back of the dark green flood dragon and pulled out her small sword to point at the sky. She also shouted along with the bunch of dragons, "Maha!" The bunch of dragons was abnormally excited, and before the war even broke out, they brought the little fox into the sky and fought their way through a bunch of devils pouncing at them. Linger, this girl is really as reckless as the cult master. Xianxia was driven mad, and she immediately jumped onto the dragon Qian's back to rush up so that the little fox wouldn't land in the hands of the enemy. Just as the dragon Qian was about to raise up, Ling Yuxiu also landed on his back. The two girls looked each other in the eyes and said in unison, "Watch out!" Boom! Sun's ship collided with the body replicator devils and trembled continuously from the impact. There were only 100,000 on Sun's ship, while the numbers of the body replicator devils were in the millions. Countless devils landed on Sun's ship, and a bitter fight instantly began. The warriors of the Sun Herder tribe had absorbed the qi of pure yang ever since they were young, so their cultivation was extremely dense and their battle power was astounding. The strength of their corporeal body also far surpassed that of the other races, and even their children, that were 10 to 15 yards tall, had natural god-level power. Their magic power was incomparably pure, and they cultivated pure yang true fire and sun true fire from the moment they were born. Their divine arts were also marvelous, and they had a variety of spirit weapons like bells, cauldrons, swords, buildings, glazed tile pagodas, which were very different from just the path of sword and knife in eternal peace. There was no worthy match for their strikes, as they just blew apart the body replicator devils, but enemies' numbers were simply too high. Hundreds of devils were like hornets that were disturbed as they swarmed up to drown out the Sun Herders one by one. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The body replicator devils opened their huge eyeballs and devil light shot out, covering numerous Sun Herders in thousands of holes. Once they were injured, it was difficult for them to escape the mind control. Hundreds of devils gathered together, and the black light in their eyes would shine on the body of the injured Sun Herder. That person's face would then warp, and their mind would then continuously be tampered. Even their face couldn't be saved from damage. Their eyes would rapidly gather together, and the two eyeballs would fuse to become a huge single one that was situated at the center of the face. Their mouth would start to move downwards, and their chin would grow longer and longer, until they become another body replicator and follow the devils to attack their own tribesmen. Sun Herder Chief brought a few elders to fight with all they had. There was no lack of extremely terrifying opponents among the body replicator devil race, which were strong practitioners that had assimilated. Their abilities were incomparably powerful, and some even wielded devil god weapons to attack. The old chief raised his head and saw dozens of huge dragons slaying enemies in the sky and causing heaven to fall and earth to rend from their battle. The flood dragons had attracted quite a bunch of experts from among the devils. However, there were simply too many devils which continuously surged forth. Why isn't His Highness making a move? Just as the old chief thought that, the 12 legs of Sun's ship suddenly opened up and walked toward the sky barrier. The speed of Sun's ship grew faster and faster. The huge ship that was like a land city was actually increasing in speed to rush toward the sky barrier. "Your Highness, what are you doing?" The old chief immediately tore apart a strong practitioner of the devil race in anger. He then rushed toward the heart of Sun's ship and shouted, "Your Highness, you can't!" Boom! With a world-shaking bang, Sun's ship crashed through the sky barrier and rushed out of the area covered by Sun Well. A huge body replicator devil god was kneeling on the ground there. With two hands supporting its body, it had stabbed its chin into the sky barrier of Sun Well. Behind its body were bone wings which were vibrating continuously. They would flap once in a while to raise up gusts of black wind. The instant sun ship broke through the sky barrier, that wind blew it backward. The devil god hurriedly flapped its wings, wanting to fly up, but Qin Mu suddenly grabbed onto the chains and exerted his force to swing the sun that was in midair. The old chief had a blank gaze as he stared at Qin Mu swinging the sun of their sun herder tribe as a weapon to smash it ruthlessly against the body replicator devil god, blasting him into smithereens with a single blow. My God! The old chief's legs became weak and he collapsed onto the floor on his butt. His Highness is too violent. As long as he gets the chance, he will stop at nothing. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 396. Threading a Needle. Hiding in the area covered by Sunwell and getting attacked by people was definitely not Qin Mu's style. His way was to grab any chance to land a fatal blow with a lightning-fast strike. Butcher had once told him that it wasn't hard to see the chance, but only those who could grab it ended up known as heroes. Those who saw the chance yet hid and did not make a move were cowards. Numerous people that were stronger than Butcher would usually be defeated by him because he was brave and pushed forward boldly. He never considered prudence and just grabbed every chance he saw. The chance that Qin Mu grabbed was to taking advantage of the moment when the devil god used itself to send in the body replicator devils into Sunwell and couldn't break free. That was why he had Sun ship break through the world formed by Sunwell and swung the sun to smash his opponent into smithereens. Being trapped in Sunwell and defending against the opponent's attacks wasn't his style. This would only make him follow the opponent's rhythm and suffer from continuous encirclement, letting the opponent attack however they wanted. That was why he changed the rhythm by rushing out and destroying the leader straight away. You fight your way, and I'll fight my way. If I win, you're dead. It was that simple, and it was the essence of Butcher's knife skills. Sun Herder Chief's body was still slightly weak. He looked at the rattling chains in Qin Mu's hands as he dragged the sun which he had used to smash the devil god back. That sun had burned the surroundings and the ground had turned into bubbling lava. Suddenly, the corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched, and so did those of the old chief. They had heard cracking sounds coming from the sun. Qin Mu blinked and gently shook the chains to flick this sun up. He didn't use all of his strength as he seemed to be afraid of breaking the sun. The old chief stood up shakily, but right then, the sun that had floated back into the air suddenly gave off a loud cracking sound again. The old chief looked up and saw an alarming crack on his tribe's treasure. He couldn't help the energy that left his limbs again. It's all right, it's all right. Qin Mu's voice boomed as he consoled. It won't shatter. Don't worry. The body replicator devil god had been shattered in one strike, but there were still countless devils frantically attacking Sun ship. They continued their slaughter and assimilation of warriors of the Sun Herd tribe. At the same time, countless devils ate each other, the bigger ones swallowing the smaller ones, so their bodies would grow larger and larger. Their cultivation also grew stronger like a rolling snowball. 3 devils who were growing larger and larger stood on Sun ship while other devils rushed into their mouths, feeding them. The body replicator devil god was not the true body? Qin Mu was astonished. He shouted, and the sun in the sky burst forth with incomparably intense true fire which flooded down and burned through Sun ship. Sun true fire blazed and turned the entire Sun ship into a flaming divine ship. Countless devils shrieked as they got burned, slowly turning into black smoke that vanished in flames. Qin Mu controlled Sun ship. Although it was a treasure to guide the sun to rise from the east and set in the west, it also had an extremely strong offense. In the past, when Yan Jingjing had controlled it, she couldn't unleash all of its power because the sun had been extinguished. But once Qin Mu had reignited the sun, the might of the ship had instantly unleashed. Even though Sun True Fire was incomparably terrifying, it wasn't much of a threat to the Sun Herders. They had lived on the ship ever since they were young and what they breathed was the qi of pure yang, so they had an extremely high resistance to true fire. Hu Linger, Ling Yuxiu, and Si Yunxiang were fighting together with the bunch of dragons and the dragon Qilin in the meantime, so the Sun True Fire didn't sweep past there. The little fox who was standing on the dark green flood dragon was very excited and kept on shouting, but she couldn't do much. Compared to the bunch of flood dragons, her abilities were insignificant. Qin Mu burned countless body replicator devils, but the 3 abnormally large devils were not burnt to death. Instead, they crawled rapidly among the intense fire and suddenly leaped up. The bone wings on their backs flapped as they rushed toward Qin Mu, who was in the center of the ship. One of the devils swooped down and stretched its hand out to pull out the devil god halberd that was stabbed in a huge hole. His aura then instantly erupted. "Don't use the sun!" The old chief shouted the moment he saw Qin Mu wanting to swing the sun again. "If you smash it once more, it's really going to shatter. We old bones will block those devils for you." Troublesome. Qin Mu stopped and surveyed his surroundings, searching for the true body of the body replicator devil god. The old chief shouted loudly, calling over the elders to face the 3 devils. Their bodies were incomparably huge and their strength was also great. Even when facing the old chief and the elders, they were not in a disadvantageous situation. The old chief grabbed a bronze bell, and it rang continuously. It didn't look like a treasure from the mortal realm as layers of runes appeared on its walls. The ringing circled non-stop around the bronze bell and sun-shaped fireballs came flying out to bombard the enemies. However, the broken halberd was still a devil god weapon, so it could easily slice apart all the divine arts from the bronze bell. It was extremely powerful. Qin Mu looked around and saw the deep and profound darkness of great ruins. He still didn't know where the true body of the body replicator devil god was located. Suddenly, the thump of heavy footsteps came from the darkness, and the ground trembled continuously from the vibrations. The footsteps came from all directions and became faster and faster. Suddenly, the noise vanished, then changed into the sound of something breaking through the air. It was very sharp and Qin Mu's heart sunk. He saw numerous body replicator devils with huge bodies flying over through the darkness, straight for Sun's ship. It was indeed not its true body. Qin Mu's heart moved slightly, and carefree sword suddenly came out from its sheath to float silently in the sky without moving. On Sun's ship, the sun hung high up in the sky as warriors gripped their weapons anxiously. They looked above and watched the numerous huge devils covering the rays of the sun as they came to Sun's ship. The size of their shadows struck fear into their hearts. At that moment, sword lights burst forth, and it was as if there was a silver sun in the center of Sun's ship. The terrifying sword will and sword chi shot off in all directions like sunlight. The divine might of carefree sword swept through the sky and black rain started falling on the enemy. Countless broken limbs fell and almost filled Sun's ship completely. Yet there was a devil in the sky that had avoided all the sword lights and flown near the 4 pillars, passed through 2 of them and went straight for Qin Mu. The huge eye in the center of the devil's face flashed with black light as it shone on Qin Mu's face. The 4 claws gripped onto Qin Mu's chest and dug deep into his flesh. The black light from the devil's eye became darker and darker as though it would swallow everything. So the spirit and soul of a person to continuously fall even though it had already fallen. On the ship, everyone cried out in alarm. The face of the old chief and the elders changed drastically. They hurriedly abandoned the 3 devils and rushed over to Qin Mu frantically. However, the 3 devils immediately flew over and delayed them, making it hard for them to save Qin Mu. "You were able to come here because I let you." Qin Mu's eyes stared straight into the devil eye of the devil as his gaze flickered. "I want to use your shared mind to know where your true body is hiding." The gaze of the devil shone onto Qin Mu's eyes, and countless voices rose in his mind. It was as if he could see countless figures, and every one of them belonged to a body replicator devil. Everything in his vision vanished, but for the forest formed from the figures of the devils. It grew larger and larger as the figures of millions of devils formed while continuing to spread out. The mind and consciousness of the devils flooded Qin Mu's mind as they tried to assimilate him. He executed Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, and his spirit embryo fused with his soul. A huge sun instantly appeared in his mind which surrounded the spirit embryo and protected the spirit platform, burning all the consciousness that was flooding over into ashes. There were more and more figures in the darkness, and it made his heart palpitate. With the minds of so many devils converging together, His spirit platform was about to be drowned out. Once that happened, it wouldn't take long for his spirit embryo to be assimilated by the devils. That was why he had to find the location of the devil god before his spirit platform was invaded. At that moment, his gaze seemed to cross numerous sights, and he saw a devil god that was creeping among mountains and rivers. He was situated between two mountains which he was holding with his 4 limbs. Between them was a river while behind a door. From it, body replicator devils poured out like flood and surged over continuously. Countless devils were sprinting through the river surface and flying in the sky. They swallowed each other over and over again to transform into the large devils. The instant Qin Mu saw the devil god also saw him. He raised his head and his huge eye filled with bafflement as though he was puzzled. What followed afterward was that devil god who was creeping between the two mountains saw a bright light shining in the darkness. It was becoming brighter and brighter. A ball of light was rushing over, and it was becoming larger and larger as its speed became faster and faster. It soon became a huge sun that slid down at an angle from the sky, appearing above the river channel. Wherever the huge sun passed, the river water would be evaporated instantly, and all the devils on the way would be turned to ashes or vaporized. The huge sun distorted the space in the surroundings and caused the mountains to shake. It looked as though it had become a giant who was doing a strange dance. Devil language came from the mouth of the devil god and was transmitted into Qin Mu's mind by waves of consciousness. Little child who only likes to smash thing on a whim. His body trembled violently, and the bone wings behind his back rattled. They flew off from his body as though they were devil god weapons, their shape similar to that of the broken halberd on Sun's ship. They shot toward the huge sun. Chi chi chi. The halberds shot into the huge sun. It became slower and slower, until finally landing in the river valley and sliding thousands of yards forward before coming to a halt. Kacha. Sun's ship's sun split into two, and a smile broke out on the face of the devil god. However, at that moment, Sun Jade Eye rolled out from the broken sun and tumbled 1 round forward. The Sun Jade Eye, which was several yards in height, suddenly straightened its pupil and a snow-white light shot out, slicing the huge eye of the devil god in half. He gave a miserable, world-shaking shriek as he dodged the attack. The beam of light sliced the skin next to his eye, so deep that the bone could be seen. Behind the broken sun, Carefree Sword transformed into a trail of light which went into his mouth and came out the other side after having pierced his brain. The sword then turned around and returned through the back of the head and came out at the front. Carefree Sword was like a needle, threading to and fro through the devil god's head over 1,000 times. It was also like a cold light swirling rapidly around his neck. When it was retracted back, the head of the devil god was filled with holes. The neck swayed, and the head, which was the size of a mountain, slid off. The body landed against the door that was behind the devil god's body, and the noise rang through the mountains. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 397. Seamless Heavenly Clothes. The corpse of the headless devil god slumped down, and the claws that were gripping the two mountains loosened. The body fell into the river channel below. The door behind was also blocked by it. In the meantime, on Sun's ship, the warriors of the Sun Herder tribe were in a bitter struggle, since there were simply too many devils flooding over. Even if the Sun Herders were natural warriors, they still found it hard to withstand the attack. Many people died and were assimilated by the devils. Yet suddenly, all of the devils froze on the spot in a daze. The next moment, all their faces distorted as though two souls inside were fighting over the control of the body. The eye on some of the devils' faces split into two before merging back together, which looked very strange. Most of the strong and sturdy Sun Herders stopped their attacks, at a loss. Their enemies had been fighting back with ferocious a second ago, but the next, they had all fallen into a strange state. After a moment, the devil who had been fighting with Sun Herder Chief crumbled and transformed back into a bunch of body replicator devils. The face of the devil in the lead changed, and the devil markings on its body receded rapidly. After a moment, it transformed into a woman with transparent feather clothing made of scales. Her figure was elegant while her skin was fair and even a little translucent. The woman looked around in a daze, completely unaware that her scales didn't cover her body well. What is this place? Her eyes were filled with doubt. She didn't open her mouth to talk, but a message was sent out with brain waves, so everyone could hear her voice and understand what she was saying. Why am I here? Soon after, more devils changed. All of them were dressed like the woman. The clothes on their bodies were not truly clothes. Instead, they were delicate wings formed from scales, and there was more than a single pair. Their whole bodies were full of wings of all sizes. Their feathers were scaled, which was a very rare sight even among beasts. Only a few of such creatures existed in great ruins. However, there were no humans with scaled feathers, and they could actually even change. The woman who woke up first quickly noticed her clothes were not covering her body, and her scaled feathers changed according to what she wanted. They shimmered, and their color changed into black, making it seem like the woman was wearing a black gown. The scaled feathers on the others also changed colors to cover their bodies. Once all of them were dressed, they looked around in a daze, having no idea where they were. The sun herders on Sunship were also in a daze. They didn't know why the devils could have transformed like that. Sun Herder Chief had a guess though. They should be a foreign race which got assimilated by the body replicator devil god. Now that the main consciousness died, the control over them has disappeared, and they have regained their freedom. This means body replicator devil god is dead. The elders beside him revealed looks of ecstasy. Suddenly, a rattling sound came from their backs, and they immediately turned around to take a look. Behind them, Qin Mu was holding onto the pillars with 2 hands while the other 2 were dragging the chains back. They were embedded in the sun and were treasures that tied it down, so it was pretty exhausting to pull them back. The old chief couldn't help becoming worried again. He immediately came to the pillars in the center and raised his head. Your Highness, why have you thrown the sun out again? Qin Mu lowered his head and hesitated as he saw the man's hopeful gaze. After a moment, the old chief saw the sun being dragged back. 2 black lumps were there, looking like huge mountains in a hemisphere shape. The old chief and the elders stared blankly. The other sun herders on Sunship also looked at the 2 black lumps in a daze. Not only had their sun been extinguished, it was even split into 2 halves. Rattle, rattle. The sound of the chains being pulled was very painful to the ears. Qin Mu pulled the 2 halves of the sun back and called his carefree sword. It lifted Sun Jade Eye and flew leisurely back toward him. Chief, 2 good news. The first one is that body replicator devil god is really dead, Qin Mu said with a guilty conscience. Stupefied, the old chief stared at him. When he spoke, his voice sounded like it came from a machine. What about the other good news? We can change a new sun now. The old chief turned his head to look at their highness, wanting to cry, but no tears came out. Truly good, he muttered. Qin Mu pulled the 2 halves of the black sun back, and there were tens of thousands of scaled feather mutants following behind it, coming closer to Sunship. Some of the people didn't manage to catch up to the sun and ended up dying in the darkness of great ruins. The remaining one knew how dangerous the darkness was and warned each other. More and more of them then caught up to the sun, and only then were they spared from death. They didn't rely on voice to communicate, but instead relied on their brain waves. Without talking, they were still able to inform the others, which was very unusual. Qin Mu dragged the 2 halves of the sun back onto Sunship when a voice rang out in his mind. Heavenly Feather Clan, Yu Zhaoqing, pays her respects to the owner of this place. Qin Mu was slightly stunned as he looked at the woman in the black gown that was walking toward him. Her actions were sincere, natural, and unrestrained. The black gown quickly changed to a light yellow color. When she came to the side of the sun divine pillars, not only were her clothes light yellow in color, their style was even similar to that of the old chief and the rest. The scaled feathers on her body had to be able to change in shape as well as color. Qin Mu loosened his grip on the sun pillars, and the 2 arms under his armpits gradually shrunk back. The leg behind his buttocks also shrunk back into his body, while the terrifying energy of Sunship receded continuously. After a moment, his body returned to its normal size. Qin Mu hurriedly hid behind a pillar and took out a new set of clothes to replace his tattered ones. After some grooming, he came out from the back of the pillar. When he was holding the sun pillars, his strength had risen tremendously and his corporeal body had become extremely gigantic, bursting open his shirt. Even though his shirt was a spirit weapon, Qin Mu had transformed into a 300 yards giant at that time, and he was like a heavenly god. He had exceeded the limits of the clothes, and with the third leg growing out from his tailbone, they were ripped apart. "Chief Yu," Qin Mu greeted. Yu Zhaoqing of Heavenly Feathers race looked at him with astonishment. Qin Mu had been a heavenly, godlike existence earlier, yet he had suddenly become a young man. The woman's clothes spread out on the ground as she paid her respects earnestly. Qin Mu immediately pointed toward Sun Herder Chief and smiled. "I'm not the chief of this place, he is. I don't dare to exceed my place." The old chief shook his head and said, "Under the whole heaven, every spot is the sovereign's ground. Sun Herder Tribe is also your highness's territory, so your highness is naturally the owner of this place." Qin Mu could only receive the respects of the woman from Heavenly Feathers race. "Chief Yu, this place is not suitable for talking. Have your clansmen come on board and follow us to Sunwell to have a talk." Yu Zhaoqing's consciousness sent out waves, and soon, all Heavenly Feather clansmen came on board. Qin Mu activated Sun Ship once more and walked back into the area shrouded by Sunwell. On the ship, the millions of Heavenly Feather clansmen looked around at the strange little world, the clothes on their body changing colors continuously. Their figures were slightly taller and thinner than those of ordinary humans. Both the men and women were very beautiful, and their clothes changed according to their mood. When it was good, their clothes would become a garish display. After letting go of the sun pillars, Qin Mu was slightly worried about touching the pillars again. The sun had been broke into half by him, and without it acting as the balance, the terrifying energy of Sun Ship had started to absorb his life force. In just a short while, his feet had already been swallowed. That was why he had taken the chance when he shrunk to jump out, but his legs were still sore and weak. "Your Highness, you need to be more solemn about meeting the chief of Heavenly Feather Clan. You can't neglect her." The old chief invited Qin Mu to enter Sun Shrine before inviting Yu Zhaoqing to come forth and meet him. "Your Highness." In Sun Shrine, Yu Zhaoqing walked forward and held Qin Mu's face, gently touching his forehead with hers. "What are you doing?" Hu Linger was bringing Ling Yuxiu and Si Yunxiang into Sun Shrine when she saw that scene. She shouted angrily, "How can you kiss?" Yu Zhaoqing looked curiously at the little girl that was barely above her thigh. She bent down and clasped Hu Linger's cheeks before touching her forehead with her own in a gentle manner. Hu Linger instantly felt some stuff appear in her mind. It was the language of Heavenly Feather Clan. At the same time, she also felt that Yu Zhaoqing had used it to trade for the language of her world. Hu Linger came to realization. "Oh, so it's not kissing. I thought you were taking advantage of my master." Yu Zhaoqing smiled and bent over to give her a peck on the lips. Hu Linger instantly blushed and her heart became restless. She swayed as though she was drunk and said embarrassedly, "A kiss is nothing much as well." Yu Zhaoqing walked over to Ling Yuxiu, and her heart became restless while she looked down at her chest. However, Yu Zhaoqing only touched foreheads with her and didn't kiss her. Once she noticed it, she let out a sigh of relief. Si Yunxiang also touched foreheads with her and smiled. "So it's exchanging language. Is this a gift of your Heavenly Feather Clan? Or is it a divine art?" "It's a gift." Yu Zhaoqing opened her mouth and spoke their language. Even though it was still not as good as that of native speakers, she was getting better as she spoke. "Your Highness killed the body replicator devil god and released our clansmen. We of Heavenly Feather Clan are unable to express the gratitude we feel." Qin Mu shook his head and said, "I didn't do it to save all of you, just to protect myself, so there's no need to thank me. Does your Heavenly Feather Clan lives in great ruins as well?" "We aren't situated here, but in another world," Yu Zhaoqing said. "The world we came from has been seized by body replicator devil god, and nearly all of our clansmen have been swallowed by him. Luckily for us, your Highness rescued us from being wiped out. Even though your highness isn't forcing us to repay the favor, we can't just not do it. The world all of you are from should be the one behind the devil god's corpse, right? Why is it linked to great ruins? Qin Mu asked with curiosity. About 20,000 years ago, our world collided with another world, and the space between them overlapped. We would notice it above our heads at midnight, and it was a marvelous sight, Xianxia said. The emperor of that world sent a god over and ordered our heavenly feather clan to surrender and pay allegiance to him. Only after that did we learn that the other world we saw was called Founding Emperor Empire. However, one day an abnormal change happened there and it turned into great ruins. Our heavenly feather world also suffered. When night came, our sky was no longer the starry one. Instead, it was covered with the blackest darkness. Sometime later, Body Replicator Devil God invaded our world. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 398. Number 1 Divine Eyes. Qin Mu was in a daze. Heavenly Feather World had collided and overlapped the world in which great ruins existed. Thus the sky of Heavenly Feather World was great ruins. It was an abnormal sight to behold. It was a pity he probably couldn't see it anymore. Heavenly Feather World had been under the ancient Founding Emperor Empire, but because it had suffered a calamity, those under it lost all protection. Because of that, the devil god could find Heavenly Feather World and assimilate all of its people. Founding Emperor Calamity had happened 20,000 years ago. It was also at that time that it turned into great ruins. The territory of Founding Emperor Empire was not only in great ruins, it even had other worlds. He couldn't help getting lost in wild and fanciful thoughts. Founding Emperor Empire had conquered other worlds and administered such wonderful ones as Heavenly Feather Clan with all kinds of life forms. Living in that era had to have been interesting. I've heard that this place was known as Celestial Heavens, Xianxia said. The Emperor is someone who ruled over all the various heavens. Qin Mu instantly thought of the time when he had brought Xianxia and her daughter through great ruins and the sight he'd seen when they passed by West Heaven Palace. Its ruins had a diagonal piece of land stabbed into it. All kinds of majestic buildings had crumbling fences and dilapidated walls. Pillars had collapsed and were sticking out in all directions while shattered pieces of huge machinery were hidden among the mountain rocks. Qin Mu composed himself and immediately pushed away his peculiar thoughts. Body Replicator Devil God is already dead, so you guys are safe now. Chief Yu, what's your plan? Rebuild our country and return to our homeland. Yu Xiaoqing's clothes gave off a gentle trembling sound, and they soon transformed into an armor. Her battle spirit mixed while a murderous aura and overflowed into the sky. I want to lead my clansmen back to Heavenly Feather World. There are many other devil races there, the assistants of Body Replicator Devil God who had seized the treasured lands of my Heavenly Feather clan. I need to seize them back and kill all the enemies so we can rebuild our homeland. There are other devil races in Heavenly Feather World? Astonished, Qin Mu calculated it for a moment. Heavenly Feather Clan is only left with these few millions of people. Will you have the power to seize Heavenly Feather World back? Yu Xiaoqing was full of confidence. Due to Body Replicator Devil God's death, the other clansmen should have also returned to their senses. We, the Heavenly Feather Clan, rely on brain waves to converse with each other. When we fight, it's as easy as commanding our arms, so it won't be hard to seize Heavenly Feather World back. Chief Yu, the paths, skills, and divine arts of the current era are different from those in the past. You guys have been controlled by Body Replicator Devil God for so many years, so you probably don't understand the current era. When on the battlefield, your brain waves can easily be intercepted. You had been controlled for so many years, so your enemies should have already learned everything there is to learn about you. In their eyes, all of you are lambs waiting to be slaughtered. His vital qi burst forth and he executed a divine art. His vital qi transformed into all kinds of strange runes to form the shape of a huge upside-down walk. The runes trembled continuously while giving off sound waves that were hard for ordinary people to hear. However, in the ears of Yu Xiaoqing, it was like a loud and resonating bell was ringing continuously, disrupting her mind. The noise deafened her and made her unable to establish a connection with her clansmen. Qin Mu dispersed his divine art and said, Chief Yu, I feel you should take your time and not rush into things. Yu Zhaoqing's heart was in a mess, and the clothes on her body went through various colors. Messy markings of all shades appeared, making it obvious that her mind was not steady. Qin Mu had only interacted with Heavenly Feather Clan for the first time, but he had swiftly realized that the mental connection between them could be exploited. The strong practitioners of the devil race would definitely be aware of it after having studied them for a long time. If Heavenly Feather Clan couldn't take out any new abilities, rebuilding their homeland would just be a joke. Returning to Heavenly Feather World was certain death. Eternal Peace Empire is currently in the middle of a reform, and all kinds of paths, skills, and divine arts are rapidly progressing, Qin Mu said. Why don't you all settle down in Eternal Peace Empire first to learn new abilities? When you guys mastered something new, you can then return to Heavenly Feather World to take back your land. Yu Zhaoqing was slightly hesitant. As the chief, she wanted for more than anything to return to Heavenly Feather World and sweep away all the devils there. Yet as Qin Mu had said, returning was certain death, so she had to take her time. Chief Yu probably still doesn't know, but this person beside you isn't any outsider. It's His Highness, Sun Herder Chief suddenly said. His Highness. Yu Zhaoqing suppressed the conflict in her heart and asked suspiciously, What Highness? The Highness of our Sun Herder tribe and also the Highness of your Heavenly Feather Clan, Sun Herder Chief said deeply and meaningfully. Yu Zhaoqing's heart trembled violently, and she immediately fell on her knee. Her clothes changed into the outfit of a subject and she greeted Qin Mu once more. Where are all these etiquettes coming from? Founding Emperor Empire is long gone, so I'm not your highness anymore. Sister Yu, please don't scare me. Qin Mu immediately helped her up and pinched the clothes on her body. He felt that the texture was smooth and humid. He asked with a smile, What are the clothes on Sister Yu's body made of? Zhao Yuqing looked at Sun Herder Chief in doubt, and he also frowned. Qin Mu seemed to be unwilling to admit that he was the Royal Highness of Carefree Village. He didn't acknowledge his identity in front of him, and he also didn't acknowledge it in front of Yu Zhaoqing. Your Highness, the clothes on my body are actually my skin and wings, Yu Zhaoqing explained. The structure of our Heavenly Feather Clan's body is different from yours. We have numerous thin wings, but we have no feathers. Instead, we have scales. When our mood changes, they will change in color as well. My Heavenly Feather Clansmen have quite a way in dressing ourselves. When Qin Mu heard her clothes were none other than skin, he couldn't help pinching it again. He discovered that the scales weren't hard. On the contrary, they were actually soft like skin. Yu Zhaoqing's face blushed from his pinching. Your Highness, you can't. Qin Mu let go and couldn't help feeling that it was a great pity. He had wanted to ask Yu Zhaoqing for a few sets of clothes like that. However, her people grew them on their body as part of it, so they couldn't be taken off and he could only drop the thought. Si Yunxiang, Ling Yuxiu, and Hu Linger came over and touched the clothes on the woman's body while clicking their tongues in wonder. As they did that, Yu Zhaoqing's face became even redder. She didn't want to let them touch, but she was too embarrassed to refuse them. She could only stand there uncomfortably. The texture is truly wonderful. It's even smoother than Linger's fur. The girls couldn't help sighing in admiration. Ling Yuxiu asked curiously, Chief Yu, if winter comes and the world is freezing, won't you guys feel cold with just that? Yu Zhaoqing shook her head and said, The 4 seasons in our Heavenly Feather World are all comfortably warm. There's no cold weather. Besides, if the weather gets freezing, our scales can be inflated with air to keep us warm. Take a look. While she was saying that, the clothes on her body became thick and puffy, but the design was still very pleasing to the eyes. Everyone exclaimed endlessly in admiration. Sun Herder Chief stood to the side, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. They had come to Sun Shrine to discuss the important matters of their clan, yet it had become a meeting to admire clothing. After the commotion, Qin Mu said, Chief Yu, you can bring your clansmen to stay in Great Ruins or follow me to Eternal Peace Empire. When the time is ripe, you can then lead your army back to Heavenly Feather World. What do you think? Yu Zhaoqing pondered it for a moment. Your Highness, please wait a moment. Let me discuss it with my clansmen before coming to a decision. Qin Mu nodded, and Yu Zhaoqing left to do as she had said. Chief, let us go and take a look at the sun that was split. Qin Mu rose and came with everyone to the center of the two halves of the sun. Numerous sun herders were trying to pull the chains out from the two lumps. They planned to use the chains of Sunship to bring up another sun from Sunwell. Qin Mu had smashed the sun on Sunship into two halves, so they needed to get a new sun to be the energy source for Sunship. Otherwise, the new Sun Guardian would be absorbed by the huge ship. Yet the chain was embedded in the sun. Even when it was split into half, it was still very difficult to pull the chains out. Qin Mu walked toward the interior of the hemisphere and saw that the inside contained a complicated three-dimensional formation structure. Thousands of formations had to be activated for the sun that had once been a golden ball to radiate astonishing rays and firepower. Because of what Qin Mu had done, numerous formations had gotten damaged. When the sun hit its target, numerous components were lost. There were over a dozen sun herders who had entered the sun to undo the chains. However, no matter how much strength they exerted, they still couldn't pull them out. Is there anyone proficient in formation skills? An elder asked loudly. These chains are stuck in over a dozen formations, and they need to be undone for us to achieve anything. The numerous sun herders that were busy immediately stopped in their work and greeted Qin Mu. He returned the greetings and examined the interior formations in detail. The chains that locked the sun went from the surface into the core, and there were over a dozen formations that were clasping tightly onto the four chains. The old chief was also examining the structure of the formations. When he saw the complicated runes on the components, his eyes were dazzled. He shook his head and said, "There are no formation masters in our sun herders, so we won't be able to undo them." Qin Mu pondered it before saying, "I finally understand why Zi Qing couldn't forge sun well and moon well even after 100 years. Everyone looked at him rather puzzled. They didn't know why he suddenly talked about Zi Qing forging the wells. The structure of the formations in this sun is actually that of divine eyes. Qin Mu walked between all the formations and differentiated the runes on top of them while speaking rapidly. The emperor must have ordered Zi Qing to forge the wells because he had seen her abilities. She must have been the #1 divine eyes back then. The attainments in her divine eyes had to have been matchless, so the emperor had ordered her to forge sun and moon well. He quickly browsed through the structures of the formations that were locking the chains once more. Coming out of the sun, he carefully examined the surface. It wasn't smooth, but with numerous markings like those of a tree's grains. The reason why Zi Qing did nothing for 100 years was because she had already realized that to forge sun and moon well, she would need to use her divine eyes as a sacrifice. When the wells were done, she would become blind. That was why she spent 100 years to enjoy her life to the fullest. Qin Mu felt around the surface of the sun, and after a moment, he found a circular marking that was jutting out at one spot. His vital qi flowed out, and he instantly saw the marking light up before starting to spin continuously. At the same time, the dozen and more formations that were holding back the chains started to operate and slowly loosened. Qin Mu nodded and said, "Only when the emperor got angry did she put in all her heart and will to forge the wells. She then dug out her eyes to light up sun well and moon well. In front of them, the interior structure of the sun was changing continuously as the formations were being solved with resounding bangs. The surface of the sun and the complicated markings were also lighting up continuously. Huge pieces on the surface started moved backward layer by layer. The half of the sun seemed to have come alive, and it frightened everyone into moving backward in alarm. They only saw the formations of the sun changing continuously until it shrunk into a solid metal wall erected upright in front of them. Qin Mu then came to the front of the other half of the sun and did the exact same thing. In the end, it also turned into a solid metal wall. The two of them stood upright in front of everyone. They were golden in color, as simple and unadorned. The height was around 300 yards and they were several miles long. God Zi Qing knew that she had to sacrifice her divine eyes to the well in order to complete the emperor's mission. So she spent 100 years to enjoy her life to the fullest before using another 50 years to complete the emperor's request. What an extraordinary woman! Qin Mu exclaimed in admiration. When he looked at the two walls, respect appeared on his face. He then said in a low voice, "She's called Qing. Z means big sister and Qing means green. It says that she was a big sister that liked wearing green in her family. What a pity I won't have the fate to meet such an extraordinary person. What happened to you guys?" He looked back and saw everyone staring at him blankly. They were all flabbergasted. Qin Mu couldn't help being bewildered. He explained, "Z means sister and Qing is green. Qing means a big sister wearing green." "And not this," an elder stuttered. "Your Highness, you have solved the formations in the sun." Qin Mu realized what he meant and smiled. "It wasn't hard to solve it. I've done some research in regards to divine arts about the divine eyes. In Eternal Peace Empire, I even forged a divine eye that had a pretty similar structure. Of course, it isn't as intricate as this sun." Qing was really remarkable. He raised his head to look at the two walls. "I've learned quite a lot of stuff. I really want to go into the well to look at her eyes." Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 399. Fishing Out a Sun. In regards to divine eyes, Qin Mu had seen much and was familiar with their structure. He had learned Blind's 9 Heavens Eyes awakening skill, and even forged Sunshot Divine Cannon, as well as obtained Sun Jade Eye and Moon Jade Eye. No matter how complicated was the interior structure of the sun Qing had forged, it had many surface changes, but no departure from the original standard. When others saw such a complicated structure, they would usually be unable to find a solution. However, he was able to quickly find all the crucial points in all kinds of formations. Qing had forged the sun not to use it as a weapon. Instead, it was used for lighting up the surroundings, so her formations had no power and were not dangerous. He could try them out without any worry. On top of that, Qing also left behind a mechanism to put away the sun. When it was activated, the sun would change into a metal wall. Because the sun had been smashed into half by Qin Mu, it had become 2 metal walls. Numerous sun herders suppressed the shock in their hearts and pulled out the chains. "Without a hook, how can we fish out another sun out from Sun Well?" Everyone looked at Qin Mu with hope. The old chief immediately shook his head. "His Highness's cultivation is not high enough. He can't go deep into Sun Well and bring up a sun. The temperature in Sun Well was extremely high, to the point that anything that the sun herders forged would melt after being lowered inside. It would be even worse for Qin Mu, who was only a divine arts practitioner of 6 Directions realm." Qin Mu smiled and said, "Chief, have you forgotten? After becoming the Sun Guardian, I can control the energy of sunship, so won't I have the magic power of a heavenly god that way? As long as I can fish the sun out, I will be able to break free and won't need to fear being swallowed up by sunship." "What if you can't bring one up?" the old chief said with hesitation. "There's no what if. Since I was the one to smash your sun, I have to be the one to get another one." Qin Mu made a prompt decision and stretched his hand out to grab onto a pillar. As his body expanded, he remembered something and transmitted his voice to the old chief. "Chief, help me prepare a set of clothes. My spare clothes are all used up." The old chief didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Every time Qin Mu transformed into the Sun Guardian, he would rip apart his clothes and have to change to a spare set. The clothes in his reserves had all been used up. He was wearing the last set. After fishing out the sun, if he didn't have new clothes, his buttocks would definitely be bare. That was because the complete form of the Sun Guardian had a 3rd leg growing out from the buttocks, which would rip the pants. "Fetch our heavenly young golden silk. Weave it into fabric to make a set of clothes for His Highness." After saying that, the old chief suddenly recalled something and hurriedly added, "Invite Chief Yu of Heavenly Feather Clan. Let her tailor the fabric for His Highness and make sure they are fitting and dignified." A few sun herders immediately left to carry out the task. Qin Mu controlled Sunship, and its 12 legs took wide strides toward Sunwell. Sunship had no sun, so it was started to absorb his life force, causing his body to slowly sink deeper and deeper into the deck. He was gradually fusing with the ship. The speed of exhaustion was many times faster when compared to the time when the sun was just extinguished. He had to fish out a sun as soon as possible. If the time was dragged out, it would become more and more dangerous. Besides Sunwell, Qin Mu's violent magic power swept up the chains inside. They were like black dragons that slithered forward into the core of another galaxy. That place was no other than Sunwell, a circular abyss that had countless suns that were like balls of light. In the meantime, outside the well, stars were shining. They were of all forms and colors as they formed the Milky Way, which was revolving around the two wells, circulating continuously. Even though the chains of Sunship were thick, they were like a few thin strings when compared to Sunwell, so the sight was indeed like they were fishing. Qin Mu, who was at top of the well, looked like a real fisherman. The chains went into Sunwell and Qin Mu's palms trembled. He frowned slightly. The chains had gone as far as they could, but they still didn't reach the suns. "Chief, order everyone to leave the ship," Qin Mu shouted loudly. Sun heard Chief immediately pass down his words, and everyone on the ship flew up in a hurry. Right after, they saw Sunship opening up its 12 legs and walking into the light pillar of Sunwell. The huge ship slanted forward and walked into the well. In the center of the 4 pillars, Qin Mu's giant body, which was like that of a heavenly god, was shaking from the somewhat bumpy ride. He had the incomparably huge ship enter the star sea. "Your Highness, Sunship has already swallowed your thighs," the old chief shouted out. "Don't stay too long or you will be swallowed by Sunship." In Constellation C, a huge ship was walking straight down the light pillar. At its bow, there was a giant holding onto the chains to get to the abyss below. Around him were stars of different colors swirling continuously. In the abyss, the huge suns radiated with dazzling rays which made it hard to open one's eyes. Qin Mu's face and chest were turning red from the scorching heat as though he was going to melt. 9 Heaven's Eyes awakening skill had already been activated so he could withstand the intense rays to look at everything in the well. Sunship was closing to the abyss while growing red-hot, but luckily, it had been forged by ancient gods, so it wasn't smelted that easily. Finally, Qin Mu saw the chains touch one of the suns. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. At that moment, he noticed that Sunship had already swallowed his waist. Crap! Without the sun as an energy source, the absorbing speed is way too fast. Qin Mu composed himself and gritted his teeth. With the 4 chains as his hands, he gently touched the surface of the sun and found where the mechanism located. His body was sinking bit by bit into the ship, and soon, the ship went past his waist. Without the sun, utilizing the energy of Sunship would cause him to suffer from the drawback. The speed of it surpassed Qin Mu's expectation. It's not this formation marking, not this as well. Even if he had activated the 9 heavens in his eyes, he still couldn't make out the markings on the surface of the sun. He could only rely on the 4 chains to touch and differentiate them. The 4 chains were like 4 huge dragons that were moving slowly. His magic power leaked out from them to form vital chi threads which he used to differentiate the structure of the markings on the sun's surface. It's not this either. His body had already been swallowed to the neck, yet Qin Mu still hadn't found the location of the mechanism. Cold sweat formed on his forehead, but before it could even flow out from his pores, it evaporated. It then turned into hot air that floated around him. Sunship swallowed Qin Mu up to the neck, and he raised his head so his mouth would stay outside. He tried his best to mobilize Sunship so its deck would face Sunwell. Qin Mu's eyes stared fiercely at it while his body kept on sinking downwards, covering his mouth. His nose was about to be covered up too. In the end, even his eyes were close to sinking into Sunship. His nose bridge was gradually covered. The instant his eyes was about to be gone too, he saw an eye in the sun. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Zi Qing's divine eye. That eye was as dazzling as a sun, and it seemed to be staring back at him. It gave Qin Mu a kind of strange feeling. When watched by that eye, he instantly felt layers of formations appear in his eyes. That feeling didn't last long, for Sunship had drowned out his eyes. Found it! Qin Mu's consciousness trembled, and he felt an abnormal touch coming from his own vital chi. He immediately gathered all his magic power, and the majestic vital chi flooded down the 4 chains to rush at the mechanism on the surface of the sun. He could only hear cranking sounds as the formation on the sun's surface was activated. The 4 chains pierced through, led by the formation. In Sun's ship, Qin Mu instantly felt the boundless strength coming from the sun flooding over. At that moment, Sun's ship had completely swallowed him up, to the point that only his nose tip could be seen. Whoosh! The 4 chains pulled a sun out from the well, and it floated up into the sky, pulling the chains taut. Outside Sun Well, the old chief looked at the light pillar nervously. Too much time has passed, too much. His Highness might not have been able to endure any later. He won't be able to escape from Sun's ship. Suddenly, light burst forth in Sun Well, and a sun slowly rose from the light pillar. Everyone was forced to move back as heat waves swept past them in all directions. Afterward, Sun's ship's huge body came out from the well with its 12 legs slowly landing on the ground. Thump! The body of the ship descended, and the land shook, causing lava to flow into numerous canals. Sun's ship was pretty stable. The old chief hurriedly flew up and barged to the center of the 4 pillars. He saw Qin Mu lying there naked, unmoving. Too much of his life force had been taken by Sun's ship. Even though he captured a sun and was saved, his life force couldn't be recovered. Move away, all move away. Hulinger sprinted over, her feet getting scalded by the scorching ground until green smoke came out. I have medicine here. The old chief and the rest opened up a path, and Hulinger flew to Qin Mu. She didn't care that her feet were blistering from the heat. In a hurry, she stuffed the spirit pills that Qin Mu had made for Yen Jingjing into his mouth. She used her vital qi to guide them into his abdomen and catalyzed the medicinal energy. When it was finished, Qin Mu slowly woke up, feeling that his body was extremely weak. He didn't even have the energy to open his eyes and could only gasp for breath. Hulinger let out a sigh of relief and only then felt her feet hurting. She immediately jumped onto the old chief's head, her eyes tearing up from the pain. The old chief hurriedly raised Qin Mu while shouting, "Quickly, to the lake!" After a moment, on the small island at the center of Sun's ship, Qin Mu was placed in a hot spring that was at the heart of the island. Beside him was a frail little girl also soaking in the water. Little brother who herds cows. The frail girl smiled weakly. Hulinger sat on the old chief's head, not daring to let her feet touch the ground, so she requested boldly and confidently to soak in the hot spring as well. My feet are also injured. The old chief was helpless and could only place her in the hot spring. Little ancestor, this hot spring is not normal water, but condensed from the qi of pure yang. You can soak in it, but you can't piss in it. Bah, only you will piss inside. Hulinger sat down excitedly and felt waves of energy from the water flooding her body to nourish her limbs and bones. Her divine treasures, spirit embryo, souls, and spirits felt comfortable, without any being an exception. She looked at the frail girl beside and said in delight, "Sister Jing of Yen family, so you're here. Young master, why aren't you opening your eyes? That's right. When you were sprawled there earlier, your butt was seen by all." Qin Mu gradually opened his eyes, and white light blinded the 2 girls. It was like countless suns had burst forth with intense brightness, making their eyes tear from the sting. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 400, Kidnapped. Qin Mu closed his eyes, and after a moment, Hulinger and Yen Jingjing slowly recovered. In Sun Well, I saw Ziqing's divine eye. Qin Mu didn't dare to open his eyes again. After that, many things appeared in my eyes. It was like her eyes had imprinted something in mine. Can you see anything now? Yen Jingjing asked with nervousness. I can. Yen Jingjing's eyes had been treated by Qin Mu and were more and less healed. She could see, but her body was still somewhat frail. She immediately came to Qin Mu's side and pressed down on his shoulders while saying softly, "We, the Sun Herd tribe, also have a technique to cultivate our eyes. It's called Pleiades Sun Star Hoops. Wait for me to execute it before opening your eyes, so I can help you take a look." Qin Mu waited for a moment. Then Yen Jingjing said, "Done." He opened his eyes, and the divine light in them burst forth, washing the surroundings in snow-white light. He then took note of the frail girl moving to the front of his face and looking at his pupils seriously. Her eyes seemed to have star hoops that shrouded her pupils. The star hoops were circulating continuously and withstanding the power of his divine eyes. Yan Jingjing examined him in detail and moved to the front of his eyes to differentiate the markings. Qin Mu didn't dare to breathe as he was afraid of blowing his breath on her face. It's a kind of rune marking that has resulted in a formation. Yan Jingjing breathed out, and he smelled orchids and iris as she pondered while examining his eyes. The outer layer looks like Pleiades sunstar hoops of our sun herd tribe, but there are other markings in the inner layers. There are a total of 4 layers. She inspected Qin Mu's pupils carefully and saw the layers of space inside. The runes formed a strange structure that was like layers of sun hoops that stretched back continuously. She couldn't see clearly how many of them there were. Inside your eye, in the centermost area of the layers of Pleiades sun star hoops, there seems to be a sun. It could also be formed by the star hoops. She finished her examination and said, "I shall teach you Pleiades sun star hoops, my pupil divine art. Try and see if you can control the markings in your eyes with it." Qin Mu nodded with difficulty. Only then did Yan Jingjing notice that her face was so close to his that they almost came into contact. Qin Mu didn't dare to nod because he was afraid of hitting her. Their gazes met, and the stars' hoops in their eyes flashed with brilliant rays. However, at that moment Hu Ling's voice sounded out. "Young master, is the examination done yet? Why is there no sound now?" Qin Mu immediately said, "Still not done yet?" Yan Jingjing burst into laughter and her breath assaulted him in the face. Hu Ling heard it and was slightly suspicious. With her arms and legs, she splashed around in the water to swim over with her tails floating on the surface. Qin Mu's gaze was too bright, so she couldn't see him. However, she could head toward the sound and stop between the two of them. Half of her body popped out of the water, and she shook her tails, flinging water on the face of the boy and the girl. Qin Mu and Yan Jingjing immediately split apart and suppressed the stray thoughts in their hearts. Qin Mu closed his eyes. Hu Ling sat in the center, separating them. Yan Jingjing immediately said, "I shall teach you Pleiades sun star hoops, so listen carefully." She then explained it to him. Qin Mu asked whenever he was in doubt and soon mastered Pleiades sun star hoops. He tried to execute it, and the layers of star hoops in his pupils extinguished one after another. However, there were still some runes that were swimming in his pupils. He opened his eyes, and there was no longer any more astonishing rays shooting out. However, in the depths of his pupils, there would be a ray of light flashing from time to time. Pleiades sun star hoops didn't close the sun markings that were in the core. Yan Jingjing swam over from the side and examined his pupils before pondering for a moment. Pleiades sun star hoops should be part of that divine eyes technique. It isn't complete, so the sun markings couldn't be completely closed. Hu Ling went to Qin Mu's side and examined his right eye as though she knew what she was doing. "Young master, there are stars in your eyes." Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "That's Pleiades sun star hoops. Sister Jing and I are currently discussing them, so don't create trouble." "Sister Jing, the imprints in God Ziqing's eyes were mirrored in mine, so we might just be able to master her divine eyes from them. Her divine eyes were definitely the #1 divine eyes in founding emperor era. If we could master them, it will be extraordinary." Yan Jingjing pondered over it and said, "It's impossible to master the #1 divine eyes just from the imprints alone. Even though I've learned Pleiades sun star hoops, I can't rely on it to deduce the technique of the #1 divine eyes. It's simply too difficult. Someone can do it." Qin Mu's eyes lit up as he was filled with confidence. "Grandpa blind from my family, he could definitely restore God Ziqing's technique just from these imprints." "Grandpa blind?" Yan Jingjing asked curiously. "Isn't he someone whose eyes can't see anymore?" Qin Mu was fully confident in blind's abilities. Even though he's blind, his eyesight is very good. He's the person with the highest attainments in divine eyes that I've met. Yan Jingjing was even more bewildered. Puzzled, she asked, "He's blind, so how can his eyesight be very good?" "Grandpa blind has the best eyesight. Grandpa mute doesn't have many words, but he scolds people fiercely. Grandpa Cripple runs the fastest. One-armed old Ma has the best fist skills. Grandpa Butcher, who only has half a body, is the fiercest in fights. And even though Grandpa Deaf can't hear, he's the best in understanding others. Qin Mu smiled. There's also the most beautiful Granny C, the cutest Grandpa Apothecary, who's #1 in both curing and poisoning others. However, the most powerful of them all is still Village Chief, who has no arms or legs. His sword skills are the best in this world. Yan Jingjing was at a loss. Then she said with excitement, I want to go out and take a look. When your sickness is cured, I'll bring you out. Qin Mu said, It's almost New Year's. I reckon we'll be eating at Granny's house this time. Do you want to go together? Sure. Yan Jingjing was indescribably excited, but her face turned dull soon. She shook her head and said, I need to stay in the tribe. There can't be no one looking after Sun's ship. If the devils come again. Qin Mu smiled and said, It's fine. I have caught a new sun and killed body replicator devil god. So there shouldn't be any enemy attacks for a little while. I'll send you back after New Year's. Yan Jingjing was delighted yet nervous. I have never left my tribesmen and went out alone before. With me around, you can be at ease. Hu Linger couldn't join in the conversation, so she could only grumble in her heart. After a moment, some women of the Sun Herders walked over and placed down a stack of clothes while saying respectfully, Your Highness, the new clothes are done. Qin Mu stood up and suddenly felt a chill on his buttocks. He hurriedly sat back down and said, Linger, Sister Jing, turn around. I would like to change my clothes. Yan Jingjing and Hu Linger listened and turned around, so he immediately climbed out of the pool. Hu Linger turned her head to peep, but Yan Jingjing immediately said, Don't peep. I was seeing if young master had any tails. She whispered back. Did you see any tails? Yan Jingjing asked with curiosity. Nope, his butt was bare. Hu Linger's voice held disappointment. Qin Mu donned the clothes and saw that they were cerulean blue in color. The overlap of the gown was embroidered with the markings of sun and moon, while the hemline was embroidered with the markings of dragons and phoenixes. The style and tailoring were very fitting. It had certain points that looked luxurious, but not too eye-catching. It was simple, elegant, and reserved. These clothes aren't bad. Qin Mu was astonished at how comfortable he felt. When he tried to execute 9 Dragons Monarch technique and his muscles expanded like dragons, his clothes also grew. They were still very fitting. Truly well made. Qin Mu was surprised and delighted. He could feel the vital qi surging through his body, moving along with the clothes as well as though they were his skin. On top of that, the clothes could automatically adjust to any changes. It's the work of Heavenly Feather Clan. Qin Mu smiled and said, If Heavenly Feather Clan reaches eternal peace, they'll be able to survive by relying on their handicraft in tailoring. He jumped back into the pool to soak. Even though the clothes entered the water, they didn't get wet. When he left the water, they were still dry. This made Qin Mu click his tongue in wonder. The pool water was condensed from the qi of pure yang, and by soaking inside, it could replenish exhausted life force. Yan Jingjing was the body of pure yang, so it had the most effect on her. Qin Mu could also absorb the qi of pure yang in the pool water by executing Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. Not only did he feel his life force recovering continuously, his cultivation was also rising. His vital qi was becoming purer as well. The two of them soaked in the water for several days, and their bodies mostly recovered. Hu Linger injuries were long gone, but she had still stuck around, not wanting to leave. So Qin Mu used that time to teach her divine arts, paths, and skills as well as how to use a sword. He also exchanged pointers with Yan Jingjing in regards to the knowledge on divine eyes, so the couple days passed in no time. Even though Yan Jingjing's life force had recovered, she was still very frail. When she stretched her arm out, her skin clung to her bones in a pity-attracting manner. Sun's ship had absorbed her corporeal body for far too long for her to recover in a short while. Qin Mu carried Hu Linger out from the water, while Yan Jingjing climbed out herself. Chief most likely won't be willing to let me leave. I've never been away from Sun's ship before, she said with some hesitation. In that case, let's not tell him. We shall sneak away. Qin Mu smiled. Yan Jingjing was so excited that her face flushed red. Her fingers curled into tight fists. Wouldn't this be not good? Qin Mu had them wait nearby while he went to find Sun Herder Chief and Yu Zhaoqing. Yu Zhaoqing had already settled the discussion with her clansmen and decided to temporarily go to Eternal Peace Empire and settle down there. They were just waiting for Qin Mu's order. He brought Si Yunxiang, Ling Yuxiu, and called the Dragon Qilin and the Flood Dragons that were playing around in the lake back. He bade farewell to Sun Herder Chief while Hu Linger brought Yan Jingjing to mix among people of Heavenly Feather Clan. Sun Herder Chief led everyone to see them off, then said, "Your Highness, Sun Guardian's body isn't well, so may your Highness look after her well." Qin Mu was stunned. The old chief waved his hand and saw them off. When they were far from Sunwell, Yan Jingjing came to Qin Mu's side and said excitedly, "Chief didn't notice me." Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "How could that old fox not notice you?" Ling Yuxiu was shocked and cried out, "The one who herds cows. You kidnapped Sun Guardian? How daring of you!" Si Yunxiang sneered and said, "He even kidnapped the princess of Eternal Peace Empire." She then looked around at the majestic sight of millions of beautiful people of Heavenly Feather Clan following Qin Mu to Eternal Peace Empire and muttered, "Cult Master even kidnapped Heavenly Feather Clan, as well as over a dozen flood dragons. He indeed has the natural qualities of being Heavenly Devil Cult Master." Patriarch's judgment was right. If it was me, I wouldn't have been able to kidnap so many followers. As for Li Tianxing, he isn't even worthy to wipe his ass.